This video is brought to you by Roll for Combat and the RPG Superstar Contest. Create up to 3 of your own Pathfinder 2nd Edition monsters for a chance at winning several prizes, including the publication of your creations in an upcoming Battlezoo Bestiary. Enter now at rpgsuperstar.com. Hey everybody, welcome to How It's Played. As always, I'm Dave, and I have a couple of special returning guests to the channel, some familiar faces you may recognize from a few months ago when they were here talking about their exciting new Kickstarter, the Battlezoo Bestiary, and now they're back with a new project to chat about. But let's just do a little rounds of introductions. We'll start with Steven. Steven, how are you and who are you?
I am good. And I am Steven Glicker. I run Roll for Combat, the actual play podcast. I also run Roll for Combat's Battlezoo Bestiary, and now Dragon Ancestries book, and now Jewel of the Indigo Isles book, and now just announced today the new Jewel of the Indigo Isles Player's Guide that will be coming out as well. And, of course, I do run the RPG Superstar Contest that we took over from Paizo, and that is what we're here to talk about today, is how to create monsters, both for yourself or if you want to submit for the Superstar Contest.
Awesome. And we also have another familiar face to the channel, Mr. Mark Seifter. Mark, how are you? And just to refresh everybody's memory, what is it that you do with Pathfinder?
Well, I'm doing pretty okay, and I am the design manager at Paizo and one of the main creators of Pathfinder 2nd Edition. So being the design manager means that I am a worker who is doing a lot of design. So I'm in United Paizo Workers, and but then I also do a lot of management where I figure out like how we can get the products from start to finish through the pipeline, working with project management at Paizo and working with my fellow designers to solve crunch and other issues and try to get things going.
Okay. Awesome. Now, we are here to talk primarily about the RPG Superstar Contest, but I figure since I have both of you here, can we just touch base a little bit on the Battlezoo Bestiary Kickstarter? How did that go? Any updates you would like to share? Big thumbs up.
It went pretty well.
Pretty well.
Yeah, I mean, it was, it was in like the top 0.5% of Kickstarters.
Yeah. How many hundreds of thousands of dollars was it?
300,000.
Right? Yeah.
Which is okay for your very first Kickstarter.
That's very good for a Pathfinder 2nd Edition base Kickstarter.
Yeah, it did really well, and we just released at least a PDF form of the Battlezoo Bestiary to everyone 2 weeks ago, and people are really loving it. We are looking, actually, there was a big discussion on Reddit just today and yesterday about how much people are enjoying it, because it's been 2 weeks and people are starting to use it, and do they love this thing. So.
It was just a spontaneous thing with that was near the top, I think, of Pathfinder 2e subreddit that was just like, Battlezoo Bestiary is underhyped was the name of it, and that was really cool.
Yeah, it was nice. But one thing I do want to mention is that a lot of people come up to me and say, man, these monsters are awesome. And I keep telling them, I didn't write them. Like, they're written by, quote, not normal people, but not professional developers, people who entered their monsters in the contest. That's right. You could write these monsters. I mean, I was in charge of the artwork, so I'll take that credit. But, and like a little bit of fine tuning and, making them.
But you didn't draw them, though.
No, I didn't draw them, but I art directed them.
You did, and you laid out like where
I did
things
do
were
the
to make
layout.
sure that the pages look nice,
Yes.
and you read through to do some editing. But
yes, yeah, but no, I didn't. It had nothing to do with the monsters, and but yeah, it's done really, really well. Mark is hard at work at dragons.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. Yes, he is.
Yep, I'm over 40 pages through, and that means I'm not even halfway there.
And we just announced today, because the book was getting so big, if you go to battlezoo.com, you can order the just the Jewel of the Indigo Isles Player's Guide, which will have all the new ancestries. It'll have the new gazetteer for the Indigo Isles. It's going to have the system called the Balance, which is our gods and magic system, and faith system, which is really unique. And it's actually being written by Vanessa Hoskins and myself. And she has written pretty famous stuff for Paizo, probably one of everyone's favorite recent adventure path that was written by her. And
she also did the Cathartic Mage and the Thessalonian Rune Magic
That's
and
correct.
Secrets of Magic.
Yep. Yeah. So she
For example.
is... Yep.
She knows how to bring on the theme.
She's really good at theme. And in fact, when I told her, I'm like, do you want to write a new religious system? And she's like, oh, do I? And she is like jumped in with 2 feet. I was like, she's really getting into it. So, I mean, how often you get to define a religious system for a new world? And yeah, but believe it or not, as many books as that's like 4 books, we are still planning for Battlezoo Bestiary, Strange and Unusual, which will be coming out next year by Kickstarter. Mm-hmm. And it's going to be decided by you, like which monsters are in there. So you got to just make a monster, go to rpgsuperstar.com, submit it, and then on December 8th, you can start voting for them, and it's public.
And you don't have to make a monster to vote if you don't want to. I mean, It's cool. You should do it. Yep. I mean, you'll be paid for the monster if it wins, and there are a lot of winners.
Although I will tell you a very funny story. I went to a game about 3 weeks ago, a role-playing game with Rob Tremarco, and I didn't know anyone at the game except Rob. And we're sitting down, and I was giving out some stickers because I had some stickers from the Battlezoo Kickstarter, and they're like, oh, this is really cool. It's like, I'm in the Battlezoo Bestiary. I'm like, what? I was like, yeah, I won. I'm like, who are you? I was like, out of nowhere, somebody's at this game. And he's like, oh, yeah, I didn't want to bother you. And then we're going through it. I'm like, I didn't even see the artwork. So I showed him the artwork and showed him what came of his monster. And he's like, oh, that was great. But I'll tell you, the best part was getting paid. So I was like, there you go.
Right.
Well, if you think that there might be 10,000 people you could have played with, then there's 100 winners. So it's like a 1% chance.
Well, it was kind of weird. That was like that. I just didn't expect that. So I was like, of all people, it was like one of the winners. I was like, okay, I guess it's a small world. So
yeah. So anyhow. So just so we can not bury the lead and kind of give it a quick little overview. RPG Superstar, for people who are not familiar with it, is now hopefully moving forward an annual competition.
Yep.
You did it last year. You're doing it again this year. It existed in a different form, being managed by Paizo previous to last year, and it's an opportunity for fans, Paizo players, GMs to create their own original monster, like you would see in a Paizo-produced bestiary. And you go to rpgsuperstar.com, and there is a little gold button in the upper right-hand corner of that screen. You can click on that gives you the template, I guess, and it provides the between that that link on the website and the game mastery guide, you should have everything you need to start the process, right?
Yeah, it actually uses the benchmarks from the game mastery guide. So, for example, in the game mastery guide, it gives you overviews if you're making a brute or a magical striker monster or a skirmisher or a sniper or a soldier or a spellcaster. And in our tool, you can type in the name, and then on the right side of the name, there's a little button. You press it, and you just say, okay, give me a brute, and then you put in the level, and it suggests all the numbers approximately where they should be. And obviously that will dynamically change for the level. And they'll do that not just for things like ability and, defensives, like, armor class saves, but it'll also help you for your spells, the DCs, the damage, for your attacks, and so forth, so you get a general idea. So you don't have to go anywhere. I mean, you can just use this tool, and if you just want to make your own monsters and save them, you can. Like, the tool will also lay out the monster for you dynamically on the right side. It looks exactly the same as, a stat block you'd see in Pathfinder 2nd Edition. And, yeah, it's pretty seamless and easy to use, so...
All right, so starting on December 8th, everybody can log into the RPG Superstar website,
Yeah.
start voting on their favorite entries there. Is this entirely being managed by popular vote, or
No.
is there? Okay, so there is like a panel that's has some input as well.
Yeah. Yeah. The way it works. So last time we had the professional judges look at all the monsters first, and then we had the public. But something that was interesting is that I looked at all the votes, and about I'd say 85 to about 90% of the votes of the public and the pros was very similar, which made me think, well, also it was a lot of work for the pros to go through hundreds of monsters because there's a lot of monsters. So, and there's a lot more public. So we're going to have the public go through the monsters first and help, weed them out or come up with, what are the best monsters. And then hopefully when we get the top monsters, then we'll have the professionals go through and give their opinions. It'll also give more time for them to go through and give information on each monster because they'll give feedback. They'll not just rank them, but also give some feedback. And after the contest is over, you'll get to see the feedback. And obviously, everyone who was an author on their monsters, this was very, very helpful. So they learned like why their monster, was a copper instead of grand prize. It's like what made it a little lower than other monsters. And it's all anonymous. No one knows anything about these monsters. The judges don't even know what monsters are going to see. It's subsets. It's no one knows anything. So it's they literally just get a list. They click on them. The monsters listed. They submit. That's it. And then they just go through their list. So.
Okay, so it is the awards are bronze, silver, gold, and is there a ranking?
Platinum,
platinum,
and then grand prize.
Platinum and grand. And as you mentioned before, it's nice that an award for this hard work is that it gets published in the next Battlezoo Bestiary product. But even more importantly, there is a cash reward that goes along with winning these as well. Have you figured out what those cash rewards are by tier? Can you share those?
Yeah, it's on the site. All this is on the site. Now, this is approximately what you would get paid if you were a brand new starting writer per word. So I'm kind of trying to use industry standard.
If I recall correctly, like copper is
$25.
For a 500 word monster.
Yeah, they're 500 to 6. They all have to be 500 to 600 words.
So if I recall correctly, copper is at a rate that like some third-party publishers give, but is lower than Paizo. As soon as you get to silver or above, you actually, I think, are getting more than a new author at Paizo would be getting for your entry, or like up at or about or more for all of the rest of those. So it's very generous in general for the reward.
Yeah, and I thought that was important that it wasn't just some token rewards, that this is, indicate of the industry of like what you would get. But it's $25 for copper. There's 76 copper winners. There's $50 for silver. There's 38 of those. There's $100 for gold, which is 18 winners. There's 250 for platinum, and there's 6 of them this year. And grand prize, there's only one, and that's $500. However, the grand prize winners and the platinum winners, they do get more money, but they actually have a little bit more work because if you win with your one monster, what we do is we have our developers work with you to create a family of monsters or variations of that monster so that it'll be 3 or 4 monsters in the book. A good example is like the Husk. The Husk won this year, and that is a corrupted, not undead, but a corrupted plant life that has like, evil properties to it. And I believe the original winner was the Dryad Husk, which was awesome and very easy to take the husk. And then we created a Leshy Husk, and then it's not a Treant Husk. I forgot what they're called in the
Arboreal.
Arboreal Husk, right? An Arboreal Husk in the Pathfinder world. So they will work a little bit harder to get those extra prizes, but no one seems to complain when they're winning the top prizes and they have to write more monsters so far. So
good deal. So the theme this year is strange and unusual, and I think you said that that's going to be the subtitle for the next Battlezoo Bestiary, strange and unusual. What does strange and unusual mean to both of you? Because that seems like it's a pretty subjective term that could go in a million different ways. So
it's the first thing I asked Steven when he said that was the theme. I was like, well, and then I listed up like 3 or 4 things it could be, and Steven's answer to that was yes.
Yep.
All of those.
Yeah. It's really simple as that, because a lot of people ask, and I'm not giving a straight answer because there is not a straight answer. The easiest thing is strange and unusual is exactly that. Like a good example is, I said it before in other examples, like if you designed a bunny rabbit as a monster. Not that you would, but it's like, okay, that's not too exciting. It's like, well, bunny rabbit that breathes fire and flies. I was like, is that strange and unusual? And I was like, yeah, it's a little strange and unusual. It just sort of focuses people to get a theme. And strange and unusual is whatever you think it is. And actually one of the categories, because it's not just what I think it is, one of the categories for judgment this year will be strange and unusual. And the voters will get to decide if it was also strange and unusual. So it's not what I think, it's what everyone thinks. And it's one of those, you don't know what it is, but you know it when you see it type thing. So.
But the most important thing, and it's something that I mentioned to Stephen when this conversation came up, and he put it right in the rules there too, is that a true superstar can create a strange and unusual monster while still using elegant rules. It doesn't mean you need to have and it's like, well, when you encounter this monster, roll a d7 to determine which of these following subsystems you have to play before you can make a strike against it, or any kind of like really complex mechanics to make it strange or unusual. You can get that across in a way that is actually easy to run at the table, and that shows more superstar skills than having the monster be Byzantine, basically.
Right, because I can see a hazard of people wanting to be very, very ambitious with something like this, and it sounds like simpler is better in most regards, and I know in the first round you had Patrick Rennie, who kind of came in on the back end for the bestiary.
He developed everything.
He's actually doing this one too. He's actually doing this one too.
So you have an absolute monster creation professional who's coming in afterwards and helping make sure that all of these stats are balanced and correct and fit within the existing Pathfinder 2nd Edition system. So if you kind of have the safety net of Patrick coming in and doing that, it sounds to me like the concept of the monster might be more valuable, or what do you say?
You have to beat the vote, right? Yeah. If you write something that's too complicated, or that you get the mechanics wrong, then the judges and the fan voters are gonna not vote you as highly. So from the concept of like pure mercantile, can Patrick Rennie fix this out towards the end versus can Patrick Rennie just spawn out the idea of it, you might be right that spawning out a really good idea is valuable, but to win a contest, you have to be able to do it all to some extent. And so, and you're right, there is some level of simplicity, like a bunny, where you're so low that you're even worse than the one that gets too complicated. But the true superstar here that is like at the top has moved past the too complicated and gone back to a place where they can be simple and very expressive about what happens to you. And I like to talk about, like, there's a lot of time spells in a lot of games systems that are very, very complex, because it's like, it's time, so we have to mess around with the actions and causality. But then, like, there's some time spells that some of our freelancers, like Jessica Catalan, wrote for Paizo in Pathfinder 2nd Edition that are very simple, but it still really feels like you're messing with time, and they got pulled through time. But when you look at the mechanics, it's like, well, I guess it just dealt damage and then the sickened condition. But when I was reading it and casting it and describing it, it felt like it was going through time, and that is actually a skill that is a challenging one.
Yeah, it's tricky to. It's one of these things you'll know it when you see it, and unfortunately, when you write professionally, you will get assignments like this. This is very common, and I get assignments like this all the time. Like, we need a monster that an entire party can fight in an arena that is CR10, and it is really bizarre. Go. That's all you get, and you got to do it. And so, this is not unexpected. Like, you're like, well, it doesn't sound like you're giving us a lot. I'm like, well, actually, I'm giving you a lot. You can do anything you want. That's the point. It's sometimes really hard if you're given too much, and and
Too
that
much
also
or
happens.
too little can be hard because restrictions can breed creativity. Like, sometimes they'll be like, well, for copy fit, we need something that is exactly between the letters WOL and WYR. And those are the only letters it can start with, and it has to be at this level range or what have you. And sometimes that can really get your thoughts going, and you're like, what could be between WOL and WYR?
Yeah. I remember seeing an interview many years ago with a comic book writer, and he said that whenever he's creating a new character or a new adversary, the very first thing he thinks of is a name. And he comes up with a creative name, and then everything else with the concept of that character kind of flows from the foundation of that name. Is that a similar path to creating a monster that either of you use, or if not, where do you folks start when you just sit down to make it?
This is a really good transition into monster building and the Game Mastery Guide rules for Pathfinder 2nd Edition, because you have to think, where are you going to start? And certainly if you're trying to get into the RPG Superstar contest, where should you start? And depending on your game system, there's different ways to do it. Pathfinder 1st Edition, which inherited from like 3.0, 3.5, D&D, was kind of a bottom-up approach where you started by tinkering with individual, very low-level, in-the-guts numbers. And when you were done, you found out what monster you got, and some of the things that you found might have been a surprise to you. And it's actually, like, as someone who likes tinkering with numbers, there is a lot of fun I have with that sometimes. But it is actually very hard because, well, that's not the way that most people think when they're trying to build a monster. Whereas in Pathfinder 2nd Edition, it's much, much easier to build a monster because it's a top-down approach rather than a bottom-up. So that means that, maybe a name or a concept, which the name gives you the concept. Come up with a high concept. What is this monster? What makes it interesting? What makes it special? When Steve and I and Linda were on No Nat 1 stream, and we were we basically let the people in the stream just vote and decide what we were going to do. And we started with a concept, and it was actually a tie in the vote between basically a non-Newtonian ooze and a 100-wing, 100-eyed Old Testament angel. Yeah. And so we decided, since it was a tie, we would use both high concepts at the same time. So thus the Seraphim was born, which is a Old Testament style angel that's very weird. And since angels in Pathfinder are messengers to somewhere or another, these are the messengers who deliver messages to aberrations or to the outer space and go to weird places that you don't expect, and that their weird physics are appropriate for. And then that was how we started, and we wound up creating a really cool monster. But we didn't have the name Seraphim until a lot later, but sometimes the name can help. So I highly recommend coming up with a cool concept, and then and even just go to the Game Mastery Guide. It even says that. Start with the concept. From there, you can build a roadmap that fits your concept well. And as Steven said, the tool on RPG Superstar on the Battlezoo site just lets you put in which roadmap you want from Game Mastery Guide, and it will actually go ahead and give you values that you want. Mm-hmm. Once you have your concept, you can also kind of figure out what level it is, because those kind of go together. When you're thinking of the concept, you're like, okay, but how strong is it if it's going to be doing the thing that I imagine it doing? So we figured out right away that this angel had to be at least like level 7 or above if it's going out into outer space and talking to aberrations or things like that, or it's not going to be able to do that very seriously. And we eventually settled on 8 because of a vote. But like the concept will help you pick the level. With the level on the roadmap, the numbers, the way Pathfinder 2nd Edition does it, they're tables, and Steven gives you those tables in the tool without reading the table. It'll give you just the correct values that you need. That help you build exactly the monster you're going to build by following the roadmap, making trade-offs where necessary to make the character interesting. And those numbers kind of flow easily so that you can spend most of your time on the best part, which is the cool special abilities, the thing that will make this monster so memorable, because no other monster does that.
Okay. Now, you mentioned a second ago about making sure that the level is appropriate for the creature you're designing. From the perspective of this competition, do you ever feel like there's like a sweet spot for level, or do you feel like maybe too many people are submitting level 18 to 20 monsters? And
Not really.
No, not that many people submit.
The sweet spot is what your comfort zone is.
Yeah.
So if you know that's your strength, pick high level. Show that off. Don't do it because you think that you'll show off more by picking high level, because you won't unless it's already your strength. You'll probably trip yourself up. Mm-hmm. But I would have maybe thought before the first contest that if it's too low level, that maybe like the fans wouldn't think it was gee whiz enough. But Steven showed me that some really, really popular ones were very low level in the contest. And so like that's where I learned just like come up with the right concept and make sure it's the right level for the concept, because you will get voted down if you have a cool concept but then pick a completely inaccurate level because you think that's the right level to win the contest.
Yeah, I believe all the winners the grand prize was level 2. And some of the best monsters are like level 1 and 2 and 3. Like, you wouldn't think that. I didn't think that was going to happen when I first started the contest. I thought it was going to be more like 7 or 8, but we were wrong. And it has to do with very creative monsters and almost doing less is more. Mm-hmm. Like, they did a lot with just the basics. It's almost like having a really good chocolate chip cookie. It's like not that complex, but when it's really good, it's really good. And the thing about what level to do, it's really what you're comfortable with, because this is the secret sauce of Pathfinder monsters, is as they go up in level, and unless you've been playing a lot of Pathfinder, especially once you get into the teens, the monsters get pretty complex. It's not, oh, they hit harder. No. That is not true in Pathfinder at all. The higher level they get fairly complex in their resistances and their immunities and their vulnerabilities and their special abilities. They are complex monsters. So just pounding away on a high-level monster usually will not work. But if you're pounding away on that high-level monster with fire, it will work very well. Things like that. So they're very much like a puzzle at higher levels. And if you don't know how to build the higher-level monsters correctly, it might get past the first round, but the judges will know immediately. They will know right away.
Steven also reminded me of a second pitfall of building higher level than your comfort zone, which is that because they're more complicated, your mechanics are going to eat more of your words.
Correct.
And you're not going to have as much space for lore. And do not underestimate the power that your lore has to win you the contest if it's good. Mm-hmm. Or even if you didn't win the top prizes, to have your monster be really important later on. Like if the Gamayun, who are these parrot pirates, a monster did not have such cool lore and art and other things that it had, it wouldn't have picked up and become just a massive part of the Jewel of the Indigo Isles adventure like it did. So don't underestimate the fact that you filling all that up with mechanics, which you may have to do for a high-level monster, is going to mean you only have a few lines for your lore and your flavor text.
So, I mean, we through this conversation, we've already hit on a number of pitfalls, problems, issues that people can encounter when they're designing a monster and when they're wanting to win RPG Superstar. Is there beyond matching level and having a tight concept? Is there one major pitfall that like you see more frequently than others that pop up when you're reviewing? What should our viewers out there avoid doing when they're making these creatures?
Oh, let me go first. I know this one very well after going through all this. I'll see what Mark has to say. Number one, by far, is too many abilities. That is the number one thing I see. And the reason is, okay, an average monster will live 3 to 5 rounds. Unfortunately, it's true. If they're living 3 to 5 rounds, you got to really make sure you got a lot of cool things to do those rounds. It actually hurts you by putting in too many abilities because they will not get to use them all. It also dilutes the monster. It makes it hard to focus. And that was probably the number one thing that happened in editing, is that we would either remove abilities, or more commonly what we tried to do was combine abilities. So we would take 2 or 3 abilities and combine it into one. So that is the big difference between, let's say, the copper monsters and the grand prize and platinum.
It also makes it harder to run if it has too many abilities.
It's way too hard to run.
So if you want to do multiple abilities, if you think carefully, like this one's a reaction and that one's the one it does on its turn, and this one's passive, you might be able to get away with it. But Steven's dead on. If you have 5 or 6 abilities that are like 2 actions or more, and this goes especially for if you just give a bunch of innate spells, which, like, to be totally clear, Pathfinder First Edition was full of monsters that have way too many spell-like abilities, and so it is a sin that many, including professionals, are guilty of. But if you put in too many innate spells and 2-action, 3-action abilities that are like, this is your turn, then the GM doesn't know what to do on their turn. Which one's the best one of these? I don't know. I have 10 of them. An experienced GM can tactically figure it out. Well, based on what my party is doing. Obviously, Prismatic Spray is right in this situation. But for other GMs, it's not easy to run. It's not necessarily as memorable or as thematic. Like when people are telling stories about the monster, you're like, the coolest thing is that razor wing feather ability. It's like, what? I fought that thing and never used razor wing feathers because it didn't have enough action. So Steven's completely right about that. I would say that another thing to look at, just in the way of overcomplicating things or how you do things, that Steven mentioned to me was your rules language can make a lot of difference between a copper and a higher rating, because once it's a good enough idea and you've come up with cool abilities, you might probably make it into the winner's circle. But to get to the higher points, you want to use tight rules language that looks like it is something that could be found in Paizo, rather than rules language that is, we all kind of know what you're talking about, but you said it was like an insight check instead of a perception check to sense motive, or even a sense motive skill check, whereas that's not a skill anymore. Right. Or use like bluff instead of deception, just like things that, like, we've all made that mistake and left those out, or just like rules language that's not very tight or accurate or similar to how it would be worded. And it's not as in pick a unit of things as like the fact that points of damage is not used in Pathfinder 2nd Edition, even though it's used in Starfinder, because the audience who are voting for that probably didn't know that, and you'll probably be fine. Whether or not you say points of damage, you should not, but it doesn't matter. But once you have used rules language that is just like kind of not the correct thing, even though people can tell what you're doing, it's going to be likely to put you into the lower tiers of success, but not take the success away from you, if you see what I mean. And if you were on the cusp, it might make the difference.
Oh yeah, it will definitely make the difference between the gold and like silver right there. Like using the rules language correctly. It's also one of those things, you just know it when you see it. Like if you're reading the language, especially once you know what you're looking for, they're very specific in the language of how attacks and spells and abilities are run. And they use the exact same language over and over and over again in all the Paizo products. And now, especially with 3 bestiaries out plus a million support books, you have a lot of examples. Like there's no excuse for you not to figure out, okay, how should this work? How does this weird ability work? Well, I bet you can find something similar. Just,
A good programmer knows don't reinvent the wheel.
Oh yeah,
Find it, take the boilerplate.
Yep.
And if you can find it that it's a universal monster ability, so you don't have to write it all out, like Steven talks about aquatic ambush, which is one of the least known universal creature rules that's back there in the bestiary. And if you can pull that out, then first of all, you saved words that you can use for something else, and that will help you be more likely to put in something cool that will win than just writing your own very long version of it. B, you've demonstrated to both the fan voters and the judges that you knew that thing existed in the back of the book, which demonstrates knowledge and shows proficiency. So never think of it as, that's stealing or copying that thing, and I'm going to get dinged for it. You will actually probably be given a bump for smartly not reinventing the wheel.
Yeah, make sure you learn all the abilities and the actions that monsters can take. As I said, like trample. Trample is a good example. Like that's one of my favorites, and it's a heck of a lot easier to write out trample 3 actions and just give the DCs, and that's it. You don't have to really write that much. And there is actually a little bit of text, but you just literally copy and paste it.
It's a damage amount and a DC, and then you're done.
Yeah, it's not. It's nothing really big. Or aquatic ambush. Or what was the super rare one you were using? Opener. Like that one's so rare. I don't even know.
That's actually a trait. It was a question that came up in the no-nat stream when people said, do you want to add the flourish or open trait to an ability? And I said, we usually don't for a monster. Maybe an open if you absolutely had to, but we don't do a flourish because you could just give it a frequency of once per round. The point of flourishes is to guard against multiple of them being used by a PC from many different sources. But if you're making a monster and you have things where you don't want them to be able to use these 2 abilities in the same round, you can just say the monster can't use the Stone Snake Slam and the Stone Snake Roar in the same round or something like that. You don't need to put the flourish trait and force people to go look it up.
Yeah, and one thing I would also say is don't get too creative, because if you're a GM and there's something there that you've never seen before that kind of goes a little outside the rules, you'll probably say, wait, and have to stop the game. If you're going to really break the game or do something a little out of the box, it's going to have to be really bulletproof. Like this has to be something that you could expect. Not only you, the GM, have to understand, but the players might fight the GM. So this thing better be perfect if you're going to go that crazy. So.
Okay. So have a good, solid concept before you start building all the stats on it. Make sure that the levels are appropriate for what that description is. Make sure you don't get too crazy with all the special abilities. Leave some space to put in lore and other descriptive text. I guess those are the big takeaways that I'm hearing. Are there any other keys or nuggets of wisdom that you'd like to impart on this audience to make sure that they are positioned to do well in the competition?
So I said it before, but all the takeaways that you said, plus once you have your concept, the next thing you need to, and good lore, the next thing you need is, like, what is the ability that people are going to remember? It's like, whoa, this creature had that thing. And it doesn't have to be a complicated ability. It's just like, it could be very simple to run it, but it could still be very memorable for different reasons. So try to think about what's going to make it stand out and be memorable. Because once you have that great concept and your rules are language is pretty tight and you have good lore, you're already most of the way there and you can get yourself over the edge. It doesn't have to be 6 abilities. It could be one, often one very thematic ability that's the one that when they tell stories about it, like a few weeks later or to another group, they're like, we fought against a monster and it did this.
Okay.
Yeah, in fact, the Cyphaflem, or whatever we call that thing.
Seraphim.
Like Seraphim, but
Seraphim.
I know, Seraphim Phlegm. That had such a good ability, which unfortunately we can now never use it because it was so damn good. That, remember, it's a reaction that if you throw, I think, a weapon or a spell or something at it, it can take it, and if you miss, it throws it back at you. But what makes it special is that the person who rolls the attack then has to roll the attack on the PC. So if I threw my spear at it and I missed, and then it throws it back at Mark, then I have to roll my 2 hit dice on Mark to see if I hit him. And here's the best part. If I crit him, he will probably yell at me to use my hero point to roll lower, to not crit him. Now, that will be memorable.
Yes.
Like using a hero point to roll lower instead of
all
higher.
angels have an aura, and their aura, like, the space is a little bit weird. You walk out of the west side and you come out of the east side, and you don't know what's going to happen. And so it bends the space of the ranged attacks that miss to hit somebody else. That's a memorable ability. And like Steven said, I mean, it might be a little bit in complaining about it, but it shouldn't be so much complaining that people didn't have fun, hopefully.
Right.
But it'd be like, can you believe it when, your arrow hit me in the face?
So
and you critted me for 40 damage.
be memorable for the best possible reasons, I guess, ideally. But be memorable is the bottom line. All right, so RPG Superstar, Strange and Unusual. You have until December 8th to get in. There's submissions. I believe each person can submit 3, right?
Yes, it's actually December 7th. December
7th.
8th is when it goes live.
Okay.
But yes, you could submit 3 monsters, and
you could win with all 3 of them. They're anonymous.
A lot of people did. Yeah.
Didn't one woman who submitted win 3 golds?
She won 3 golds, and that was only out of 12.
Not that many golds.
There was only 12 golds, and she won 3, and it's completely anonymous. So there you go. That is a superstar.
If she's not already a freelancer or somehow in the system, like, I don't know, that might have some weight on our profile, resume, or something. That's got to raise eyebrows.
Gold.
Yes, 3 golds.
And I'll tell you something else. Anyone who submitted the monsters for the first round and got in the book, they can submit this time too. There's very little preventing you. Basically, if you work for Roll for Combat directly, so Mark, you can't enter. You can't enter. Or if you have hardcover cover credit, which unfortunately both Mark and I have, so we can't enter either. But
is there some number of interior credits that make
I think it's 3 interior. It's 3 interior credits.
Okay, so this is my challenge to that triple gold winning person from last year, is that she needs to win 3 or more golds this year as well, and the year after that. And then she'll be ineligible, but she'll have 9 gold monsters.
Or higher.
The Michael Phelps of RPG Superstar there.
Yeah, I think it's, I'm trying to remember. It was KM Kolvak, I believe is her name.
Okay.
They just...
The one to beat this year. There you go.
Well, I know there's also the grand prize winners.
So the grand prize winners and the platinums, they're all submitting again. Trust me, I know.
I'm sure they're going to be back.
Their monsters were good. Let me tell you, like, when they wrote their secondary and third monsters, they required very little to no editing. So there you go. So the competition's going to be there this year.
All right. Well, thank you very much, guys, for coming on and talking a little bit about the RPG Superstar competition. I'm very much looking forward to casting my votes and seeing what comes of it. And I'm looking forward to seeing, I'm assuming, a Kickstarter next year for the Bestiary. That's going to be Battlezoo Bestiary, Strange and Unusual. I want to say Battlezoo Bestiary 2, but it's going to be Strange and Unusual, but looking forward to that.
It's always better not to put a number on it and to put a theme name that's cool on it, because a name of something that's cool can make someone excited about it, but you're never more excited about something that is 2 or 3. Like, that's not very exciting.
Put numbers on it. That's a marketing trick. There will be other things in there. In fact, Mark and I are already contemplating.
Oh yeah, that thing is wild, Steven. If you want us to have time for that, we're gonna need to stop making the dragon book so long.
Give us an exclusive here, Steven. Hit us with
I will. I will give you an exclusive.
Too early.
I'll give you an exclusive. It's nothing I haven't said before.
Okay.
You will learn what the name Battlezoo means, because everyone's like, "What the hell is Battlezoo? What does that mean?" I'm like,
"It's never explained in Battlezoo Bestiary." Never explained.
There's a reason, and you'll find out in the next series of books.
Okay.
What Battlezoo means and what that's all about.
Well, I'm looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to hopefully having you folks back to talk about the next round of books when those are ready. And any final thoughts from either one of you before we bring this to a close?
I would say just submit. Like, I've been seeing people, they've been coming on our Discord channel, and the community is really helpful. They'll help you out. People giving their ideas and even asking for feedback. And, some people are sitting there thinking, well, should I, shouldn't I? You literally have nothing to lose. I mean, at worst case scenario, you'll get feedback from the community. What will make your monster better for next time? Or best case, you win. So there you go.
Yeah. I mean, if we're talking about, we talked before about people who might have imposter syndrome and think, I'm not sure if my monster is good enough. Even if you're sure that it's not good enough, and even if you're right, you still might as well submit, because the tool makes it very easy to follow the roadmap. So it won't take you very long to come up with it if you have any concept at all for a monster. And then you're going to get, at bare minimum, because the community is voting, a bunch of community people who voted between your monster and other monsters who saw it. Mm-hmm. And then, like Steven said, are going to give you some feedback. Mm-hmm. And you're going to be able to see what happened in the contest and follow it. So there's a lot of reasons. Maybe if you literally don't have enough time and you don't have any monsters to submit. But other than that, you just might as well, even if you're sure you're not going to win. And you're right, because you still gain from it.
Yeah, and the tool will give you all the numbers. If you are unsure of what the strength should be, it's if you put in brute, and I know it's going to be a brute, then just use what it suggests. That those numbers are time tested. Trust me, they work.
Yeah.
So
you can change it if you know what you're doing, but if you don't, you can just use the suggested things from the tool and focus all your effort on a cool ability or two, and you're set.
Yeah, don't worry about, it will figure out all the ACs, it'll figure out all the saves, it'll figure out all the stats, it'll figure out pretty much everything, even if you want to give them some skills, what those should be. So that will be done for you. You can spend all your time on lore, attacks, and abilities, and that's it.
Fantastic. Well, thank you again for coming on the channel here. Everybody out there, you have until December 7th to submit your 3 monsters and take part in the RPG Superstar contest. That's rpgsuperstar.com is the website. And as always, thanks for watching and happy gaming.